Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are going through Dao De Jing today. And we're going to be reading our favorite verses. I want you to go ahead and type an exclamation, type the verse that you would like to discuss in the chat. And we will have multiple readings of the verse using multiple translations. So if you want to read, so for example, Jyoti has typed 23. Type only one at a time. So we'll start with 23. So I want volunteers to read 23. And Joe has asked for 17. And so let's start with 23. Now, anybody who wants to read, go ahead and type exclamation mark to read number 23. Okay, we'll start with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Let me just decide which one I want to read here. I'll read the Jia Fu Feng.
Go ahead.
To talk little is natural. High winds do not last all morning. Heavy rain does not last all day. Why is this? Heaven and earth. If heaven and earth cannot make things eternal, how is it possible for man? He who follows the Tao is at one with the Tao. He who is virtuous experiences virtue. He who loses the way is lost. When you are at one with the Tao welcomes you. When you are at one with virtue, the virtue is always there. When you are at one with loss, the loss is experienced willingly. He who does not trust enough will not be trusted.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is going to be Jyoti. Jyoti, go ahead. If you could read number 23.
Okay, this is by Stephen Mitchell.
Okay.
Express yourself completely, then keep quiet. Be like the forces of nature. Be like the forces of nature. When it blows, there is only wind. When it rains, there's only rain. When the clouds pass, the sun shines through. If you open yourself to the Tao, you are at one with the Tao, and you can you can embody it completely. If you can open yourself to insight, you are at one with insight, and you can use it completely. If you open yourself to loss, you are at one with the loss, and you can accept it completely. Open yourself to the Tao, then trust your natural responses, and everything will fall in place.
Wonderful. I'm going to read one more translation, and then Jyoti, you can talk about what you like about it, and then anybody who wants can talk about what they like about it. This is Ursula Le Guin translation. Nature does not make long speeches. A whirlwind doesn't last all morning. A cloudburst doesn't last all day. Who makes the wind and rain? Heaven and earth do. If heaven and earth don't go on and on, certainly people don't need to. The people who work with the Tao are Tao people. They belong to the way. People who work with power belong to power. People who work with loss belong to what is lost. Give yourself to the way, and you will be at home on the way. Give yourself to power, and you will be at home in power. Give yourself to loss, and when you're lost, you'll be at home. To give no trust is to get no trust. Okay? Jyoti, what do you like about this? What are your thoughts?
I was hoping somebody else would translate it, but in my own thinking, I think it's about sense and sensibilities and controls, how to let go of the controls. The sensibility is, Tao says, you express yourself and then just be quiet because you want others to take over. And just like the life has forces of nature, I mean, the nature has forces just like that. You have some force in you. When it blows, there's only wind. That means when when it is blowing, it's about the wind. And when it is raining, then it's all about the rain. So give a chance and be contemplate, pull back and watch what is happening. And if you open yourself to the way of life, that's Tao, you are at one with, then you are the life, you are the way of life. And you can embody it completely. You can embrace it. But if you open yourself to an insight, then you become insightful. Then you are the one who's insightful. And you can use it completely, and then you can use it completely. But if you open yourself to losses, and then you can accept the losses very easily and completely. So open yourself to the way of life, then trust your natural responses that come along, and then everything in life falls for you, falls in place for you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. Anybody else wants to comment? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, I'm just struck actually by the distinction between your translation actually, Shrikant, and mine. When she's talking about it's the same idea, following power, being consumed by power, then you'll be consumed by power. But or if you're following the Tao, that you're experiencing virtue, then you're going to live a virtuous life, and there will be in accordance with nature and with a certain degree of tranquility. And I think it's also really expresses the concept of water, be like water in this particular, that if for my particular translation, the loss is experienced willingly, then you're actually going with the flow of life. You're not resisting life. Therefore, there's a degree of peacefulness and energy that comes along with that. So those are just my comments. But I was struck a little bit by the words that Ursula Le Guin used versus some of the others.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Evanique, followed by Katie. Evanique.
I think what I was struck by is when people were reading this, and when Jyoti was talking, there was a sense of peace. Like this verse helps you get to a place of peace, and it's a peace not because everything is going your way. It's a peace because you choose to go with the flow of everything. I think when Jyoti said, speak your mind and then remain silent and listen, right? I think that's the key, is that sometimes you give, and especially in this verse, sometimes you give and sometimes you receive. And you need to do both. You need to be able to give and you need to be able to receive. I think one of the last lines where it talks about in order to get trust, you have to be able to trust. And when I think of that, I'm like, well, that's profound, because it's like whatever you give out, you will receive. And so I just think it's kind of like, this giving and receiving in life, sometimes you give, sometimes you receive, sometimes you rest, sometimes you work, and just being in the flow of that. And I just get this sense of peace when this verse is read.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Evanique. Next up is Katie.
The point is very small, but in the meantime, since we've done this, since we did the first run through of all the verses, I've been learning about impermanence and Buddhism. And for me now, I feel like I want to read Dao De Jing all over again to feel those concepts in there. But I feel the impermanence that whatever it is, it will pass. It's just something that so I feel that in there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. I love this. I love Dao De Jing. So so the first paragraph, right? We're talking about first stanza. Nature doesn't make long speeches. A whirlwind doesn't last all morning. A cloudburst doesn't last all day. Who makes the world? Who makes the wind and rain? Heaven and earth do. If heaven and earth don't go on and on, certainly people don't need to. So firstly, there is this deep principle in the Tao. So this is an opportunity for us to connect up Tao and the other readings that we are doing. The deep principle in Tao is just this saying, is this acceptance of nature, of being simply open, and just this complete unconditional acceptance of the Tao and what it is. And starting with that, because all of us have our own ideas of how things should be. And then we try to put, we see only that. We think of everything in terms of power or in terms of loss. And when we do that, we look at the world only through that lens. And what this is saying is that, start with the Tao. Start with the Tao. Jyoti used the term open, be open. I also like the term at the end, that Ursula uses, trust. So to give no trust is to get no trust. So it's all about trusting the Tao. And I always like this parallel construction, for the Tao, power and loss. Let's just read the part about the Tao, what is being said. The people who work with Tao are Tao people. They belong to the way. Give yourself to the way, and you will be at home on the way. To give no trust is to get no trust. Again and again throughout Dao De Jing, that is the core. In some ways, that is the core message of the Tao as best as I see it. So thank you for picking that one, Jyoti. Next, we are going to number 17. Who would like to read? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to read number 17. So we'll have few translations and then few other translations, and then we will go. Joe, even the person who is reading it can read it first, and then we will have other people read it. But then comments always start with people who chose that poem. So let's start with Joe, Evanique, and Penny. Joe.
I think I'm going to read the Jia Fu Fang again. I tend to like her translations. The very highest is barely known. Then comes that which people know and love. Then that which is feared. Then that which is despised. Who does not trust will not be trusted. When actions are performed without unnecessary speech, people say, "We did it."
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Evanique, followed by Penny. Evanique.
I am going to read from the Dwayne Dwyer version. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. So it's chapter 17. With the greatest leader above them, people barely know one exists. Next comes one who they love and praise. Next comes one who they fear. Next comes one who they despise and defy. When a leader trusts no one trusts him. The great leader speaks little. He never speaks carelessly. He works without self-interest and leaves no trace. when all is finished, the people say, we did it ourselves.
Thank you. Next up is Penny.
Okay, this is the Stephen Mitchell translation. When the master governs, the people are hardly aware that he exists. Next best is a leader who is loved. Next, one who is feared. The worst is one who is despised. If you don't trust the people, you make them untrustworthy. The master doesn't talk, he acts. When his work is done, the people say, amazing, we did it all by ourselves.
Wonderful. All right, now let's have people comment. We'll start with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
I love this passage because I think that, the people that I've ever come across that are true leaders in my life have always been barely known. And they're the ones behind the scenes actually just making things happen. And they're constantly working and they're constantly doing acts that make everybody around them better. So they have this way about them and they don't have to talk about it. Many times people, I think, have to feel like they have to prove themselves, but the leaders that don't say anything never have to prove themselves. And so it's a beautiful thing to witness. And I find it to be actually a virtue in a way. And, then it goes through the progression of the types of, leaders that exist and, the ones that are loved, feared, and despised. And I think that is accurate. I think there are people that, there are some leaders people like, and there's some they just fear and some they can't stand. But I really like the next line as well. Like, in order to trust, like to earn the trust of the people, you have to trust them. You have to extend your trust. And it's almost like reading with the Bible. It's like God's grace extended to you. And your grace has to be extended. And so that you have to trust the people around. And I was actually in a conversation earlier today about how there was a leader who had to actually get to know her employees a little bit better and trust them. And once that did, everything started to blossom. It was a really interesting discussion. And then, not speaking unnecessarily. That's pretty important. And ultimately, when the people say, we did it, and that's the collective effort, and it leads back right to the leader who doesn't have to, who takes pleasure in the fact that everybody else is happy, that everybody else is taking, they feel like they're part of something, but the leader is there and is barely known, and he's okay with it, or she's okay with that. So I find this one to be extremely deep and beautiful to I loved it.
Excellent. Excellent comments. Thank you. Next up is going to be Evanique, followed by Bryant. Evanique.
I'm pretty much going to say what Joe said. The thing that I love about this verse is that it shows the servant's heart of a true leader. A true leader is serving the people that he leads. And if you look at people in religion like Jesus and, even Krishna, they are almost, when they're on the earth, obviously they're seen, but, a lot of things they do, they do unseen. So I think the thing I love about this verse is that the leadership aspect of it, and it just shows what true leadership is, and and how to be an effective leader yourself. You could take it, and you don't have to have a leadership title or a leadership role. You could just have, you could lead and while being a servant. You can lead without the title. You can lead in your everyday life, your everyday ordinary things. You can just, when you're helping people, you're leading. When you're serving people, you're leading. When you're listening to people, you're leading. When you're giving advice after listening to people, you're leading. And like, I think when you take the victory and when your people are victorious, you're victorious. That's like the best feeling in the world. So I love this verse too. But you know, I'm done.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Evanik. I wanted to point out that Ursula uses the same two lines in this verse and number 23, 17. To give no trust is to get no trust. It is used in this verse and that verse. Now that's very interesting. So let's start, because they are about two very different things. But wait a minute, I made a mistake here. It's next is going to be Bryant, John Paul, and then me. Bryant, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to what the group has mentioned. Evanique, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. I agree with Joseph as well. And when Evanique was talking, when she was explaining what she believed from what she read, I immediately thought of leading from the middle. There's a quote that my friend always tells me is that the greatest leaders among us are the greatest servers. And when I heard this chapter read, I thought of the man that decide, or the woman that decides to break generational curses and decides they don't want to be abusive to their spouse, or they don't want to be in poverty anymore. When they decide that, they create a different dynamic within their gene pool and their family for centuries after they're gone. And those centuries you're forgotten, but your values are kept forever. And I really do enjoy that. And then the whole, if you don't trust the people, they will become untrustworthy. That's a funny, I like that line, because I always say I trust everybody. I trust good people to be good, and I trust robbers to rob. I trust liars to lie, and it's in that way it doesn't create toxicity within my heart. Like, it's from me understanding where they're at, I'm able to, respectfully attend to their needs, how they come to the table.
Wonderful.
That's
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. I really like your comments. The first part where you talked about how a leader is a servant. I mean, we've been looking at that in the farewell discourse in Gospel of John. I mean, take the simple example of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. Now, that's simple. It's such a simple action, but it's such a profound action, because what he's saying is that I am the master and I am the servant. So you be the servant. You wash feet of other people. And what that does is that produces that is actually stating a principle, which then becomes the principle that the disciples use to build the entire community. So what an act of leadership, that simple one action. And it's an action of humility. At the same time, it is a teaching of a very profound principle of equality of human beings and respect for the core of human beings, no matter what human being you're dealing with. And that is being done in such a simple action. It's a great example of what you're talking about. Thank you. Next up is John Paul. JP.
I think, hello. I think everything does get done, and it doesn't need to be observed as to who is the leader, because everybody is being led by Wu Wei, by the flow. Whatever amount of force, effort, subtlety we put into something, we all put in that effort. Who knows which one of us is really doing the most or leading? Somebody with an idea, somebody with the written plans, the people who do the construction. Here is Earth that has made all the materials for us. All these ideas have continued through history. The first person to even consider the construction of something, that first step, has started every other construction that happened. So where was the first leader anyway? The primogenitor of everything. Just every idea itself has created the next idea that followed. So for me, is to look at everybody as having been a proper leader. Thank you.
Thank you, JP. So I want to make the comment about the parallelism between numbers 17 and 23. Ursula uses the same lines. To give no trust is to get no trust. In number 23, she was talking about the Tao, power, and loss. And here she's talking about different kinds, or Dao De Jing is talking about different kinds of leaders. If you look at the best kind of leader, he's like the Tao. You know, he's simply acting on nature of people and nature of interaction between people. And that is why he's not even seen, because he permeates, that way of operating permeates through everything. So, and when if you're afraid of the leader, you know, if you say, oh, the leader is very powerful, that is equivalent to you trusting in power. If you're afraid of what the leader is going to do to you, that is being focused on loss. So see how beautiful the Dao De Jing is. She's talking here about kind of ideas and here about people. And it's the same point put in a different way. Thank you. Next, we will go to the next verse. Let's see who had. Folks, go ahead and type a verse number to choose the verse that you would like to talk about. And then we'll go from there. So far, I have Evanik with 7 and Martha with 80. So we will start with Evanik. Evanik, would you like to read verse 7? Anybody else who wants to read, go ahead and type an exclamation mark.
This is that 7th verse. Heaven is eternal, the earth endures. Why do heaven and earth last forever? They do not live for themselves only. This is the secret of their durability. For this reason, the sage must put himself last and so ends up ahead. He stays a witness to life, so he endures. Serve the needs of others and your own needs will be fulfilled. Through selfless action, fulfillment is attained.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Penny. Joe.
I'll read the GFO thing again. I want to read Jason's, but I can't pull it up. Anyway, heaven and earth last forever. Why do heaven and earth last forever? They are unborn, so ever living. The sage stays behind, thus he is ahead. He is detached, thus at one with all. Through selfless action, he attains fulfillment.
Thank you. Next up is Penny, and then anybody who wants to comment on this. Penny.
Okay, and this is verse 7. This is J.H. MacDonald. The Tao of heaven is eternal, and the earth is long enduring. Why are they long enduring? They do not live for themselves, thus they are present for all beings. The master puts himself last and finds herself in the place of authority. She detaches herself from all things. Therefore, she is united with all things. She gives no thought to self. She is perfectly fulfilled.
Thank you, Penny. All right, let's start with Evanik about what do you like about this verse?
Yeah, something that Brian said about the last verse, I think applies here as well. When he talked about breaking generational curses. You know, I think that's something that lives beyond your physical life. And when I look at this, it says, "Heaven is eternal; the earth endures." Why? They do not live for themselves only, and I think that is really good because you can live for yourself and live for other people. You can take care of yourself and take care of other people. You can love yourself and love other people. It doesn't have to be in either or. It's both. And it's both is essential. And it says it's the secret of their durability. And I think about that is that and again, I always love the Tao because of balance. There is this balance of, looking inward and focusing outward. Um, you know, looking at different ways that you are here to serve. And I think when you're doing that, you're doing your purpose. And it says here, serve the needs of others, and all your own needs will be fulfilled. And I think that's so true because, you're not focused on your problems. If you're having problems and there's really nothing you can do about it, or you're doing all that you can do, you've taken the action, you've done the karma, you've taken the action, and there's nothing more you can do. The best way to stop thinking about it and to stop overthinking it is to look outward and to look to see how you can serve and to find out what's going on in other people's lives. Call your friends, see what their needs are. It helps you take the focus off yourself. And I love this verse because um it doesn't mean that you don't take action and that you don't pay attention to what's going on in your own life. It means that once you've done everything that you can do, focus on other people, and maybe they need your help and you can help each other. But even if they can't help you, you can get your mind off of what you can't control. So I'll leave it there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Evanik. Does anybody else want to comment? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark while you're getting ready. I'm going to read one more translation. This is by, again, Ursula. I really like this translation, so I always read this. She has titles for these poems, for these verses, and she calls this Dim Brightness. Heaven will last, earth will endure. How can they last so long? They don't exist for themselves, and so can go on and on. So wise souls, leaving self behind, move forward, and setting self aside, stay centered. Why let the self go? To keep what the soul needs. Okay, next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
I mean, I like this one a lot as well. I think, I like a lot, I sound like I'm repeating myself, but this one tells you what is eternal and what does it really mean to live through the Tao. And even if you read, so I'm looking at the Stephen Mitchell and the Jia Fufang versions, and the idea that the sage stays behind, thus he is ahead, he is detached, thus at one with all. And even Stephen Mitchell says it has no, meaning the Tao is infinite and eternal. Then he goes into it has no desires for itself, thus it is present for all beings. And what it really says is just what is enduring, and that's living in accordance with nature, and living in accordance with not attached to worldly things. And it's also talking about the importance of selfless action as well. So I think that that is how you achieve fulfillment, is through pursuit of virtue. So that's just my thoughts on that one.
Thank you. Thank you. This reminds me of Gita and the principle of attachment and non-attachment. Another way, again, connecting up to 23, it's all about being focused on the Tao. And Tao is just what is. It is universal, that is running through everything. So if you trust that, and if you're attached to that, then you're attached to the whole thing, everything. You're saying yes to existence itself in all its manifestations and all its vicissitudes. That is contrasted to being attached to particular things, and particular things about yourself, your ego. So if you are attached to your own emotions, your own particular actions, your own physical possessions, your own ideas, by that you are away from the Tao. So the sage, the wise souls, leaving the self behind, so leaving the attachments of the individual things aside, move forward and setting self aside, stay centered. See, again, this word centered. It's a beautiful word because they are acting from and towards the core of their own beings and core of nature, as opposed to this false idea of ego that most of us get attached to. Okay, let's go with Martha and number 80. Martha, go ahead.
I'm reading from the Stephen Mitchell translation. If a country is governed wisely, its inhabitants will be content. They enjoy the labor of their hands and don't waste time inventing labor-saving machines. Since they clearly love their homes, they aren't interested in travel. There may be a few wagons and boats, but these don't go anywhere. There may be an arsenal of weapons, but nobody ever uses them. People enjoy their food, take pleasure in being with their families, spend weekends working in their gardens, delight in the doings of the neighborhood. And even though the next country is so close that people can hear its roosters crowing and its dogs barking, they are content to die of old age without ever having gone to see it.
Thank you, Martha. If you would like to, if anybody else wants to read, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Next up is Joe.
So this is Jason's.
Mhm.
I was able to find it. In a small state with few people, let people have many tools, but they don't need to use them. Let people worry about death so they don't migrate to distant places. There are boats and carriages, but people don't ride on them. There are weapons and armors, but people don't display them. Let people revert to the ancient way of tying knots. Let them taste their food, admire their clothes, settle in their homes, entertain their customs. Their neighboring states overlook one another. The crowing of roosters and the barking of dogs can be heard from one another. Throughout their lives, people have no comings and goings with one another.
Thank you. Next up is Evanique.
This is the Wayne Dwyer translation. Imagine a small country with few people. They have weapons and do not employ them. They enjoy the labor of their hands and do not waste time inventing labor saving machines. They take death seriously and do not travel far. Since they dearly love their homes, they are not interested in travel. Although they have boats and carriages, no one uses them. They are content with healthy food, pleased with useful clothing, satisfied in snug homes, and protective of their way of life. Although they live within sight of their neighbors, and crowing cocks and barking dogs can be heard across the way, they leave each other in peace while they grow old and die.
Thank you, Evanik. All right. Now, I would love to hear your comments. We'll start with Martha, and go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to comment. And also, if you'd like to talk about your favorite words, go ahead and type the number in the chat. Go ahead, Martha.
And the reason I like this verse in particular is, it makes me think about a lot of things. For one thing, the culture that he's describing is so radically different from ours. And it's hard, I guess, for me anyway, to imagine people being so content that even hearing the noises of people nearby wouldn't entice them to even travel to see what, you know, these other people are up to or doing. That even the curiosity of seeing other places and travel is, you know, just not something that interests them at all. The other idea that I like about it is the idea that labor saving machines, the invention of those type of things, for these people anyway, is a waste of time. I think there is something lost when people don't have a direct experience of taking care of themselves and doing things. There's a craftsmanship that's lost when things are manufactured in mass, and there's also a great quality that's lost in that type of in economy. And these people see that there's a value in taking the time to make things, taking the time to do things themselves rather than relying on machines. And I think that's something our culture really needs to remember, is that there is value in that. You don't have to just do things the most efficiently to be the best. The greatest efficiency isn't always the best way to go. That's the lesson primarily that I get from that.
Thank you. Thank you, Martha. Next up is Evanik.
Yeah, I always think this is the homebodies first. For people that love to stay close to home and enjoy the comfort of their own home. And I think it speaks to also, there are people that enjoy their own company and the company of the people closest to them. You know, I know some people just have this wanderlust, and that's great. But I think here, you know, especially in an extroverted society like America, where everybody's encouraged to travel, to do new things and see new things, there is a value then of people that like to create the home and create the comfort. And in different religions, there's oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of the name of this goddess or this patron saint um that loves, that like builds the hearth of the home, or keeps the wood, keeps the home fires burning. I think there's a greatness in being able to enjoy the comfort of your home and to make whatever home it is comfortable. And if you think about the people that he's talking about, it's not like fancy homes where it's like 5 bedrooms. It's like exactly what you need. And it talks about um, they're staying snug in their homes. So there's not a lot, but it's what they need. It fills their needs. It gives them a shelter, and it's the personality of the people that make the home. So I think this is the homebodies first.
Thank you. Thank you. So folks, please go ahead and type verses that you would like, especially people who have not put their favorite verses. I would love to have different people's favorite verses read out. I will follow my example. Joe, we'll put you, Joe and Jyoti will put you on the second turn. If anybody else wants to go for it, just go ahead and type your favorite verses. Let me add, I'm going to add my favorite verse here because I've not had a chance to go. By far, my favorite one is number 25, because to me, it summarizes the entire philosophy of Dao De Jing. This is Ursula Le Guin translation. There is something that contains everything. Before heaven and earth, it is. Oh, it is still, unbodied, all on its own, unchanging, all pervading, ever moving. So it can act as the mother of all things. Not knowing its real name, we only call it the way. If it must be named, let its name be great. Greatness means going on. Going on means going far. And going far means turning back. So they say, the way is great. Heaven is great. Earth is great. And humankind is great. 4 greatnesses in the world, and humanity is one of them. People follow earth. Earth follows heaven. Heaven follows the way, and the way follows what is. Anybody else wants to read? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. We'll start with Joe.
I'll read Jason's again. There is something formless prior to heaven and earth. It is soundless and formless, independent and unchanging. Revolving endlessly, it may be thought as the mother of the world. I do not know its name, so I just call it Tao, an arbitrary name. Name it great. To be great is to travel on. To travel on is to travel far. To travel far is to return. Therefore, the Tao is great. Heaven is great. Earth is great. Man is also great. There are 4 greatnesses in the universe, and man is one of them. Man follows the ways of earth. Earth follows the ways of heaven. Heaven follows the way of the Tao. The Tao follows its own ways.
Thank you. Next up is Evanique, followed by Penny. Evanique.
This is the Wayne Dwyer version. There is something formless and perfect. Before the universe was born, it is serene, empty, solitary, unchanging, infinite, eternally present. It is the mother of the universe. For lack of a better name, I call it the Tao. I call it great. Great is boundless. Boundless is eternally flowing. Ever flowing, it is constantly returning. Therefore, the way is great. Heaven is great. Earth is great. People are great. Thus, to know humanity, to understand earth, to know earth, understand heaven, to know heaven, understand the way, to know the way, understand the great within yourself.
Thank you, Evanique. Next up is Penny.
Okay, this is the Stephen Mitchell translation. There was something formless and perfect before the universe was born. It is serene, empty, solitary, unchanging, infinite, eternally present. It is the mother of the universe. For lack of a better name, I call it the Tao. It flows through all things, inside and outside, and returns to the origin of all things. The Tao is great. The universe is great. Earth is great. Man is great. These are the four great powers. Man follows the earth. Earth follows the universe. The universe follows the Tao. The Tao follows only itself.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody wants to comment, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. My favorite thing about this is this really summarizes the Tao beautifully. Firstly, it's a great description, beautiful description of the Tao. And then there is the earth and heaven, kind of yin and yang. And then there is you. So if you look at I Ching, it is more of a dance between the heaven and the earth, whereas Tao actually gives you the entire context for thinking about it. And you have to act in accordance with it. So there, in this like a four-fold structure, it places the Tao, it places the receptive element, the initiating element, and you in there. So I find it just incredibly beautiful summary of this entire Dao De Jing. All right. Anybody else wants to comment? You can do that. Otherwise, we'll go to the next ones. And folks, if you have not had a chance to put your favorite verses, you will get priority. So we're going to start with Jyoti, Joe, and then Evanik. So number 29. Who would like to read number 29? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to read number 29. We'll start with Joe.
Going back to the Jia Fu Fang, Jason as the Chinese in the between makes it a little tough. Do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe it can be done. The universe is sacred. You cannot improve it. If you try to change it, you will ruin it. If you try to hold it, you will lose it. So sometimes things are ahead and sometimes they are behind. Sometimes breathing is hard, sometimes it comes easily. Sometimes there is strength and sometimes weakness. Sometimes one is up and sometimes down. Therefore, the sage avoids extremes, excesses, and complacency.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Jyoti, followed by Evanik. Jyoti.
Okay, I'm going to read Derek Lynn. Those who wish to take the whole world and control it, I see that they cannot succeed. The world is a sacred instrument. One cannot control it. The one who controls it will fail. The one who grasps will lose, because all things either lead or follow, either blow hard or cold, either have strength or weakness, either have ownership of the take by force or take by the force. Therefore, the sage says eliminates extremes, eliminates excess, eliminates arrogance.
Thank you. Next up is Evanik.
This is Wayne Dwyer. Do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe it can be done. Everything under heaven is a sacred vessel and cannot be controlled. Trying to control leads to ruin. Trying to grasp, we lose. Allow your life to unfold naturally. Know that it is too a vessel of perfection. Just as you breathe in and breathe out, there is a time for being ahead and there's a time for being behind, a time for being in motion and a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous and a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe and a time for being in danger. To the sage, all of life is a movement towards perfection. So what need has he for the excessive, the extravagant, or the extreme?
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Jyoti, would you like to talk about what you like about this verse?
Okay, I didn't give it much of a thought, but I'm going to see if I can interpret it. This is also about the controls that we go out of the way to control our life, to control others, to control everything around us. So those who wish to take the world and control it, they will never have a success. They will never succeed, because the world is a sacred instrument. As it is, the world has its own piousness or the holiness that you cannot control because of that. But if you try very hard, if you want to control it, you might fail. You will fail. And if you try to grasp very tightly, you will lose. And because all things, well, I'm reading it aloud. If anybody else wants to chime in here, because it's kind of self-explanatory.
That's fine. Jyoti, you can read it if you want.
Okay,
Whatever, please go ahead.
okay. Because all things either lead or follow, because that is very true, because you can either lead or you could follow. There is no like in between, either blow hard or cold, and or has strengths or weaknesses, either have ownership or take by force. Therefore, the wisdom says, the wise people say, you must eliminate the extremes, you must eliminate the excesses and eliminate the arrogance. That's what is the way of, should be the way of integrity or life. That's my take.
Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is going to be Katie, followed by JP. Katie.
Yeah, I see it in the modern sense of like you can't change evolution. Maybe it's bigger than you, or you can't change the universe or any of its laws. I think you can improve the world in small ways, but if you wanted to, if you think you can overly control, I know so many people who thought who plan their life so very carefully in many ways, and then like life hits them with surprises. And I think it's just saying to if you accept everything that is, then the things that you might perceive as bad, like a rainy storm. Oh, I wanted to be packing my car that day and then it rained. Well, that's just everything that is. You just accept it.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Next up is JP, followed by Joe. JP.
With the verses of the Dao De Jing, I practice Tai Chi. Tai Chi is the split into yin yang, the balancing of two forces. Before Tai Chi, there is Wu Chi, which is something, but it's nothing. Wu Chi never exists until we actually notice it, and that becomes the balancing of everything. Shrikant, going back to 25 about existing, being silent, standing alone, that's a Tai Chi stance. I've done nothing. I've not needed to move. Where I need to move, whether to attack or defend or to stay balanced, whether to heat up some tea, pour the water, or add the tea bag, I'm always balancing. In 29, in the control, I don't want to hold anything too much. I might lose it. In Tai Chi, if it was a battle, if I grab too hard, the other person can take his force or her force and use that with my force, and I will not have any force, even though I'm grabbing the harder. That person, even though I'm trying to lead with a grabbing force, that grasped hand on theirs, they will lead me. It will switch and balance. It's to be gentle and flow, blowing hot or cold, the strength or the weakness, the proper balancing in all things, even in making tea, so that I don't burn myself, scorch the tea leaves and lose the flavor. That's how I read these. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for bringing in Tai Chi. I think, this is all about practice. So just wonderful that what you said. Thank you. Next up is Joe.
So there was a saying I once heard that said, set out to correct the world's problems and you most certainly will become part of them. And I find that that's appropriate here. If you're trying to change the world, then you're probably going to be part of the problem. And so that because the reality is that nature is change and we're part of nature. So for us to step out of that role is to go against the Tao.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the next verse, and that's going to be, let's see here, give me just a second. It's going to be verse 81. Who would like to read 81? Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to read it. Start with Joe.
I'm going to read, I'll read a GFI. Truthful words are not beautiful. Beautiful words are not truthful. Good men do not argue. Those who argue are not good. Those who know are not learned. The learned do not know. The sage never tries to store things up. The more he does for others, the more he has. The more he gives to others, the greater his abundance. The Tao of heaven is pointed but does no harm. The Tao of the sage is work without effort.
Thank you. Next up is Penny. Penny, go ahead.
Okay, this is the J.H. McDonald translation. True words do not sound beautiful. Beautiful sounding words are not true. Wise men don't need to debate. Men who need to debate are not wise. Wise men are not scholars, and scholars are not wise. The master desires no possessions. Since the things she does are for the people, she has more than she needs. The more she gives to others, the more she has for herself. The Tao of heaven nourishes by not forcing. The Tao of the wise person acts by not competing.
Thank you. All right. Anybody wants to comment, go ahead and type exclamation mark. We're going to start with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that this is one of those verses that kind of sums up the Tao. We start out with words and how words divide things. But truthful words are not beautiful. The truth is not always, what we want to hear. Beautiful words are not truthful. Sometimes people speak beautifully, but they're not speaking honestly. So they're sometimes not telling you the truth, not being forthright. Those who argue are not good. And I find that, arguing is not necessarily something that would obviously be in accordance with the Tao, but it really doesn't serve any purpose. It's you can have opinions and dialogue, but arguing is it's a exercise in futility. The sage never tries to store things up. The more he does for others, the more he has, and I think that is something that is a call to service. The more he gives to others, the greater abundance, so that what's truly good and what's truly valuable. And then you find joy in that. And I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else wants to comment? Go ahead and type exclamation mark. Okay, if there is nobody, we will go to the next verse. And after which I want to just talk about the Tao as a whole. what is it that we've gotten from the Tao? What do you, how has it impacted your life? What do you think of Dao De Jing? So that's going to be next, but the last verse is going to be by Evanik. It's going to be number 9. So anybody who wants to read number 9, go ahead and type a exclamation mark. We'll start with Evanik.
Was Penny first?
I didn't notice. Penny, were you first? Go ahead.
Oh. Am I supposed to read or?
Yes, just read number 9.
Okay. This is Stephen Mitchell. Fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt. Chase after money and security and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval and you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity.
Thank you. Next up is Evanik, followed by Joe. Evanik.
I would just like to say I like Penny's version better. Verse 9, Wayne Dwyer. Keep on filling is not as good as stopping. Overfilled, the cupped hand strip. Better to stop pouring. Sharpen the blade too much, and its edge will soon be lost. Fill your house with jade and gold, and it brings insecurity. Puff yourself with honor and pride, and no one can save you from a fall. Retire when the work is done. This is the way of heaven.
Thank you. Next up is Joe.
I'm going to read the J.H. McDonald one. Nobody's read from that version yet. It is easier to carry an empty cup than one that is filled to the brim. The sharper the knife, the easier it is to dull. The more wealth you possess, the harder it is to protect. Pride brings its own trouble. When you have accomplished your goals, simply walk away. This is the pathway to heaven.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Anybody who wants to comment, go ahead and type exclamation mark. We'll start with Evanik.
Okay, so I think Penny's version really shows why I love this verse. I think we don't know when to stop. Like we always focus on perfection. Always striving, always going, always achieving. We always talk about going to the next level and going to the next level. And, always preparing, always studying. And this goes in the face of that. And it says to keep on filling is not good, it's good as stopping. It's knowing if it's like you're getting to that point where you wanted to be, then stop and enjoy it. I think that's what it means. It's stop and enjoy it. And yes, eventually you're going to study something else or you're going to learn something new. But, once you've reached, once you've reached the pinnacle of in a particular area, to stop. And I think to stop is also mean to I think it just means to take a break and enjoy. And I think, puff yourself up with honor and pride and no one can save you from the fall. I think when you keep trying to perfect and to learn more and to be the best and do the best and strive to be number one and strive to be the sharpest tool in the shed, you fall into that. And I think of the Gita when, I just lost my train of thought, but I was thinking of the Gita and just, not desiring so much, not desiring things. And because I think the desire is what it's like it's almost insatiable. You're never satisfied, you're never happy with where you are, you're never content with where you are at that moment, and you're not present. You're always looking to do the next thing, to do the better thing, to do the next great thing, to be the best, to be the greatest. And it's just this whirlwind. It's like hamster wheel that you just keep going around and around and around, especially when you don't have a point where you stop. I think we talk about it in a design way too, where is like, where's the point where you've gotten all the information? Where's the point where you're implementing? Where's the point where you go to good enough instead of perfection? And so I think this is a very deep verse, and this is one where I meditate on because I have not perfected this yet. Like, I always feel like there's something I could do better. I could be better. I could be stronger. I could be this. And I never really stop to be satisfied with where I'm at and just enjoy where I'm at. So I take this verse to heart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Joe.
I think that this one, I like this as well, is that there is an element of temperance. And while it's a very profound point, because I think, especially maybe within this group, because there's a constant striving, a constant learning that's going on, and it's when you've accomplished your goals, simply walk away or do your work, then step back. I think that's an important message, to not lose sight of what you've done in the process. When you're constantly striving and looking to do better, that you have to take a step back and get a perspective, and look at what you've done, and then also I think to see how that fits within the whole. To have perspective, not to get too high or too low. We actually just talked about that in the previous, or one of the verses, with the sage doesn't get complacent or excessive or but I think this is a very important message for this particular group, because I think there's a definite constant striving here. So anyway.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Penny, followed by Paul. Penny.
Yeah, I think this reminds me of what, I can't remember, sorry, the person had said that, because, like what our society is like. Our society is saying, always do the next thing, always want the next thing, try to get as many people to think you're great as possible. I think that's kind of the way that things are structured, which is, obviously kind of the opposite of what should be. So I think what they're saying here is the Tao is basically, following that is following nature. So if you think about nature, what do you need? Well, you need some food, you need something to clothe yourself in, you need some protection. And so when you have achieved these minimum things, that's really all you need. And you should stop there. And, just basically, at that point, you kind of contemplate life, and the universe as it is. You'll have time to sit back and think if you're not striving all the time for something. And I think the chase after money and security on your heart will never unclench. I think that's, it's just something that we have been led to believe, like you've got to work, you got to save money, you've got to get this, you got to get that, and you'll be more secure. But, the wealthiest people are the most worried about somebody breaking in and taking all their stuff, because somebody could always break in and take your stuff, but they can't break in and take you and the tranquility you would have, and, your personal, the person you could be if you were just focusing on yourself and the minimum and going along with nature.
Thank you, Penny. Next up is Paul, followed by Katie. Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I was with some of you guys last night and we were talking about the imposter syndrome, and the idea came up that this drives home. It's kind of why I joined. I'm sorry I joined late. And just to summarize how I love what we just did here right now, which is illustrate the point that was made last night too, that the imposter syndrome, which I won't bother, you guys probably know what it is a modern phenomena. And it was created, this drives home the point that it was created by exactly the things the last three people just talked about. Because if we're in a meetup here, and for instance, we're doing Dante's Inferno, and somebody memorized every single line of it because they grew up in Italy, like someone said, then if you're looking at it from the point of view of I'm not at that point, you start to feel like you're an imposter in the meetup. But wait, we are trying to do something else here, and Srikant always emphasizes it. If you admire the person because they're presenting as sort of a humble, with a humility of where they are, and they're sharing, and they're this place on the path, the whole need for worrying about if you're at their level goes away. And so in this group does strive, but I think it does attempt to do what we're talking about here. And I value that highly. And that's the solution, is you look for a different set of values that make you admire the person as opposed to how many facts they know. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Next up is Katie.
I think some of it might be I noticed when I didn't check on Facebook that my need to strive became less. That when I used it like the old system, how when you used to just, you're like, oh, I really want to hear about them, I'll call them. When I used Facebook more like that and I didn't check it otherwise, then that kind of kept a lot in my check, that striving, because then when I was like looking at them, I was really only looking at them with the intention to connect. I wasn't then noticing, okay, and that might kick my need to strive more than I naturally would. And I think Penny made that funny comment about like if you're super rich, someone might break into your house. The best article I read on Quora said that wealth might not be a linear thing. So maybe if you have a little bit of money, you can't meet all your needs. And then if you get maybe a lot of money, especially if you're a man, you can get dates with it. And you're saying then, you get too much money and then you need a bodyguard to protect you from all the other people that might harm you and want to sue you. So it might not be this just like more is better thing. It might be more is better up to a point. And then, after a certain point, it could actually be a liability for you. So it's not a simple thing.
Thank you, Katie. I mean, this is a tricky point because what Dao says is that this is really about pursuit of material things in order to impress other people, and that is something which is kind of self-defeating after a point. So brimfill the bowl, it'll spill over. Keep sharpening the blade. You will soon blunt it. Nobody can protect a house full of gold and jade. Wealth, status, and pride are their own ruin. I think this captures it very well. Wealth, status, and pride are their own ruin. So you're pursuing wealth, you're pursuing status, pursuing pride. It is a never-ending thing because it is all about things, impressing other people and impressing yourself. What all these verses are saying is to do good, work well, and lie low is the way of the blessing. When we not dealt with verses today which are all about the valley of saying that you're kind of accepting the entire nature, and that quest of doing that, of just accepting nature, I don't think there is a limit to that. There are some things which have limits, like the material things have limits. Your opinion of yourself, your opinion, all of those have limits. You're going to hurt yourself if you do that. But on certain things, like saying, are you going to be open to the Tao? You have to be open to the Tao as much as you possibly can. and there is a never-endingness to it. So there is, I think there are two kinds of things, and he's, as best as I can see, they're talking about those kind of things, which are very different. Another way of putting it is making the distinction between value and virtue. You're not, what it is saying is that values are limited. They're for a certain purpose. If you keep on pursuing those values, they're not going to get you anywhere. But virtue is unlimited in the sense that you're trying to be as best as you can, and you're doing that all the time. So I think there is a difference. I don't know what people think about, what is it that is limited and what is it that is unlimited. Any thoughts? We'll start with Evanik.
I think what is limited is when you said like you strive to do your best. I think that's unlimited. Striving to do your best when you're doing something. I think what is limited is time and resources. And what I mean by that is that, in a sense, we're all limited to the time we have on this earth. But it's our choice as to how we use it, and what we choose to do with it. I think in terms of resources, there's a limited amount of resources as we can see, on the earth. We got to give the earth a time to renew. I always think of, earth religions that say everything is cyclical. So, and I'm going to talk about it in terms of the moon. There's a dark moon. It's before the new moon. There's a dark moon where you're harvesting. I mean, not that you're harvesting. You're hibernating, like you're resting, and you're rejuvenating. And then there's a new moon where you're just peeking out and you're just starting to do things. And then there's, I forget if it's waxing then waning. Then it's a half moon, a quarter moon, half moon, 3/4 of a moon, full moon, and then you go back into the dark moon. And so to me, those are all stages of light. And so like, you're hibernating, then you come out a little bit, and then you shine a little brighter, you work a little harder, then you strive a little more. And then eventually when you're at the full moon, I think of that as the goal. And like you've achieved that particular goal, and then you go back into rest. So I think when you say in terms of limits, I think there are certain things that are limited, and there's a reason for that, because everything is cyclical and you need certain times of rest, you need certain times of work. So yeah, I think what's unlimited is your spirit. I think who you are as a person, whether you believe that's God or whatever spiritual belief you believe in, that's unlimited. You could even think of it as consciousness. Your consciousness is unlimited. Your imagination can be unlimited. That's the beauty. So, I think there's room for both. I don't think limited is a bad thing. I think we think it is, and especially in Western culture, we really think limitations are a bad thing. We always have self-help folks talking about go past your limitations, do that. And they'll tell you these success stories. But what they fail to do is to say, sometimes your limitations are your limitations for a particular reason. And maybe it's not for you to do, maybe it is for you to start, and maybe someone else to continue. So those are just my thoughts when you said that.
Thank you. I was just asking about, Joe asked, can you restate the question? The question is simply what is limited and what is unlimited? Like, is, for example, quest for, focusing on your own soul, is that limited or is that unlimited? Is saying that I'm going to act in accordance with Tao as best as I can. Is that limited or is that unlimited? But clearly, the things that are listed here are limited in the sense that the wealth, certain pursuit of status, it will start to hurt you if you start pursuing it beyond a certain level. But are there things which can be pursued in a unlimited way? So that was the question. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. I think knowledge can be pursued in an unlimited way, without a doubt. So, I mean, we can always know more. Things are always happening, and our perspective is always limited. So I think that that's one thing. So I think living in accordance with the Tao is also something that it isn't limited, but it's our ability to do it would be limited, I would say. So our capacity, so the idea of the sage, I don't think is something that is reasonable. And I think there's limits to what we can do. I think there are limits to how we name things as well, the labels that we put on things. I think when we start dividing things into parts, I think there are limits to that. That when we start categorizing, things in our lives. It's an interesting question. I mean, when I'm thinking about Taoism, what is limited and what is unlimited? Those are my answers for now.
Thank you. Evanik, I really like your observation about the spiritual and the consciousness as being kind of unlimited, of saying that you're trying to be aware and you're trying to act from your core, and so that's very good. So folks, what I want to do now is to step back and look at the Dao De Jing in the light of everything else that we are doing. So how is Dao De Jing adding to you? How would you compare it with what we are doing with Gospel of John, Bhagavad Gita? What are the differences you see? What are the similarities you see? Any thoughts about kind of the special place of Dao De Jing, special place of Bhagavad Gita, special place of Gospel of John, how they speak to you? So it's you don't have to do a pure comparison. You can just talk about your impressions of all these three works, and anything that you want to say in terms of similarities, differences, their unique nature, just anything. Would love to hear from you. We'll start with Evanik, followed by Joe. Evanik.
So I think from the Gita, the Gospel of John, and the Tao, I think of them almost as, how in the Bible talks about the synoptic gospels. I kind of think of it as that, believe it or not, because I see the core ideas is that God is inside of you. We are 100% human. We are 100% divine. We are imperfectly perfect, just the way we are. There's an acceptance of who you are, but that acceptance doesn't mean that you become complacent. But what it does mean is that you love the person that God created you to be. And you recognize who you are, and you're willing to learn, always being willing to learn more about it, always knowing that that's one thing that's unlimited. It's always the ability to go deeper. But when you're going deeper, it's not to impress people. It's not to please people. It's not to make somebody think that you're great. It's not a people pleasing type thing or for status or fame. It's getting to the core of who you are. It's getting closer to God or Krishna, or it's getting closer to the core of who you are. And I think that's what brings it home. And the Tao puts it perfectly. that the Tao cannot be named. We tried to put a name on it as human beings. We wanted to limit it, but it's unlimited, and that's the beauty. Is that as long as you're seeking it, you're on the right path. I think that's the beauty of it too, is that you're on the right path. And a lot of people take in particular the Bible to mean that you have to be perfect. You have to obey God's laws so stringently that if you mess up, you're done, you're going to hell. And that's not the message. The message is to keep striving. We see people all the time in the Bible that messed up. David, Solomon, they said Noah was a drunk. Abraham didn't trust, not Abraham, Abraham's father didn't trust God, so he only went a certain amount. Abraham didn't trust God, so he told everybody that Sarah was his sister, and he gave his sister away to Pharaoh. Like, these are people with flaws, but they keep trying. And I think that's the message, is to keep trying. You'll become a little better every day.
Thank you. I would love to hear from anybody who would like to speak. Next up is going to be Joe.
Two things that immediately come to mind that link the three. I think they all try and address your desires, what you desire and what you're desiring exactly, to desire something better than than just your pure instincts. And to think about how you actually pursue what you want in this world. I think that's one thing. I think the other aspect of it that really the three of them talk about is letting go, which I would equate to forgiveness as well. So I think that the three works definitely covering that. I think the Gospel and John and Gita are much more action oriented in how you act in the world. And so there is a very big difference with that and the Tao, which is essentially focused on how you experience the world and to essentially go along with that experience. As far as what I've actually gotten from the Tao, just I don't know if that's still a question, but on the table, but just going through it this evening again, it has a really calming effect. That it's meditative, and it also just reminds you about the journey that you're on in life versus the what you have to do right now with all the things going on. I think it gives you a certain amount of patience and tranquility that probably I don't that exists in the other two works, don't get me wrong, but it's just a little bit different in how it looks at nature. Those are my initial comments. I'm sure I have some more.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Next up is going to be Paul.
Yeah, I'm glad to answer this because it gives me a chance to talk about it, but it's very personal. I can only talk about it personally, not like sort of as a person who's studied them and goes, here's the three commonalities. It's how it affects me that I can talk about, which is similar to what Joe said in terms of the soothing. It brings the most sense of like a profound peace and an understanding of kind of a mystery combined with peace, that when I read the other texts and we talk about the other texts, I learn, but maybe because of cultural reasons, I don't get those feelings. But I'm not from China, but when Srikat read his favorite tonight, and there's this logic in it that isn't actually Western logic, but a sentence ends with one word and then it says, and from there's this, and that ends with a word, and it's its own form of logic. And it's so beautifully mysterious and it's so peaceful to hear it. And none of the other texts give me that. So that's what I wanted to
Wonderful.
contribute to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So let's talk about, I think I like Paul's idea of talking about it in a personal way. So for me also, I mean, I think the Dao De Jing, firstly, I have to say that, look, this is new, it's like, these are incredibly deep works. Every time I go to them, I get something more, which is an indication of how deep they are and how little I know, both together, and this happens for each of them. So I'm saying things based on that. Tao, I have the same reaction that Paul has, or what Joe talked about, because it is all about just acceptance of what is. There is a beautiful book by C.S. Lewis called Abolition of Man. It's a very short book. And he's trying to talk about the concept of God across multiple religions. And he uses the word Tao for God. He's writing from the Christian tradition, but he uses the word Tao. And I think that is very profound, because I think that the concept of Tao as presented in Dao De Jing makes that concept of God far more accessible, far more direct. You can, and you can feel it in every verse, because Dao De Jing is pretty much about that, of saying yes to the Tao and then gently moving in that direction. It's a very simple work in some ways, much more simpler than the other two, because it is simply saying, this is the metaphysics, this is what it is, and accept it, trust it, love it, and you'll be fine. That it's very, very simple message, and very, very powerful message. Now, the beautiful thing about that is that approach is the same approach for Bhagavad Gita. You say Brahma is what it is, and you as Atma, the core of your being, is the same as that. And you simply say yes to it and go on. So it is, or in Gospel of John, you're simply saying, understand God and act in accordance with God, with nature. That's all. So in that sense, that core message is there in all three. So it is the foundation of all the three. But Dao De Jing focuses on that. And it really just focuses on that in so many different ways, from so many different perspectives, that you really, really get it. And you have this sense of peace, of just saying, yes, it is. You're saying it is to universe, to reality, to yourself. And that as the starting point. Now, I am particularly fascinated by Gospel of John, because I find partly it is new to me, and each of these works, while we're talking about commonalities, each of these works do something which is quite different from each other. So for example, Bhagavad Gita is very rich in terms of different pathways that you can follow, and how you can reach the same thing through multiple paths. So it's giving you this entire map of yourself and saying, look, you can go this way, and there is no shame, of saying, okay, I couldn't do this, but I can do this. So, but it's going to lead you the same way. So it's a profoundly kind of accepting, and it's a very rich work. The beautiful thing about Gospel of John is that it really culminates in the character of Jesus. And you're showing a person. That's a very powerful thing. And it is you're seeing his consciousness, his words, his emotions, his love, his actions. So it's a very direct way of grasping the ideal in a very powerful way. And so that's why I love Gospel of John. Bhagavad Gita, I love the richness of it, that it is, and it's literally the hand of and the voice of Krishna saying, look, you are my friend, okay, and I'm trying to help you. You can do this, or you can do this, or you can do this. So that entire idea of a conversation between God and man, it's profound idea of that conversation, and the richness of it. So those are the ways in which I respond to these three works. Would love to hear what each of your answers are in terms of how do you personally see these works. We'll start with you.
Yeah, one thing I was going to actually just mention is that the Gospel of John, the Gita, they're using different ways of understanding the world, making sense of the world, bringing order to the chaos. Whereas Tao does something slightly different. It brings its own order, but it brings it through just experience and nature. And that's the best way I can explain it. But I think that in their own unique way, and I think communing with the texts and going through the Gospel of John, going through the Gita the way we did, I think that makes it a little bit more special, not one over the other. I'm just saying it changed my perspective, and it re-engaged me with the spiritual side of my life. Especially, initially the Gita, with just understanding what it meant to go inwards, and to understand your soul, and your ego, and the different pathways to tranquility. But I've also found that with the Gospel of John again, as well, in a very deep way, going through it this particular time. You see not only the acts of Jesus, but also the acts of the apostles. That you see yourself in the apostles, like you see their failings, where they fell short, and you see the ideal in Christ. And I think it's a powerful story. It's less of a conversation between God and the apostles. Like, I feel like Jesus was doing more lecturing in a way, whereas I feel like Krishna and Arjuna are having a dialogue as to bring him along as to why he needs to fight in this war, why this duty exists. And it's it's an example of why we need to endure things in this world that we don't want to endure. And I think the cross actually does something similar in a way as well, that Christ picks up. So I think that those works, I think that they all bring their unique perspectives on the world. And I'm glad we revisited this evening, because I really think that it's just reminding me of how peaceful it was to go through the Tao.
Yes.
It really, and it's something that, every 6 months it can be repeated. I know that other people that do it every 6 months, and I can see why.
Thank you, Joe. So I'll make two comments. One was the recommendation that Yasuhiko made. He says, look, all these systems are systems unto themselves. So you have to kind of look at them. You can do a little bit of comparison, but primarily you really need to kind of get into how Dao De Jing is looking at the world, how Bhagavad Gita is looking at the world, and put yourself, or how Gospel of John is looking at, and put yourself fully in that position, because it's a constellation of concepts that work together in a certain way, and they have an integrity of their own. And you kind of have to get into that world fully in order to get the full value out of it. The second point I want to make is that I thought that we were extremely fortunate to have somebody like Yogeshwar, because the level at which he embodied these ideas of Gita was unprecedented. Okay, I mean, I like everybody here, and I like all the speakers that we have, but I think Yogeshwar was really, really good in terms of how well, not only how well he understood it, but how it had completely become a part of him. So by just speaking about these things and the way he did it, he actually showed us what that it meant. Because it's not just scholarship, it is all about living it. And I thought that he did just an incredible job. So I think we got Gita far more deeply as a result of it. The good thing about Gospel of John is that it is more accessible to us. For us in the West, it is far more accessible. So we are able to do more. I like the idea of doing these monthly sessions, Tao and Gita. And of course, Gospel of John, we are still going. And that it's so amazing what Gary is doing and all the conversations. But I want to continue doing that. All right. Anybody else wants to say anything about these three works or the Tao? All right. Let me ask Evany Kenjo. So monthly Tao is good, right?
Absolutely. I was just going to say thank you for doing this. I think one of the things, if you do it monthly, like I had gotten out of the practice of reading the Tao. So tonight really brought it back. And I think knowing that it's coming monthly will really like have me reread the Tao again and have a new appreciation. And for people, for new people coming in and bringing in their perspective, I think that's great. Like, you didn't have to participate with Jason and Aman to show appreciation for the Tao. And I think hearing that perspective, it's just great. Like, Joyty and Bryant and Penny and Paul, in addition to the usual suspects, the perspective that they brought to the table was just brilliant. So definitely, I like it.
Wonderful. I also want to say that, I think what Jason and Aman did for us, for the Tao, was very, very special, because thanks to them, we are able to kind of go character by character and see the complexity to some extent. It is still very hard to do that. Also, the idea of these multiple translations, I mean, how incredible is that? Of just being able to read all these translations, because this again, emphasizes the point about this multiple perspectives. This is the same verse, but all these great translators bring out different aspects of it. And when you put them all together, the picture that you get is far richer. And I also like all the comments. The Dao De Jing series I loved very much, because that no matter how much I prepared for it, when I actually came and heard everybody read their translations and then talk about it, it was always like one level up than whatever I could do on my own. So really, I really love that. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of doing it monthly, but also I like the multiple translations that you were talking about. That was really special on a number of levels, because you can see the liberties that translators will take. And it was really interesting if one particular text didn't speak to you, then another one would.
Yes.
And that was like, if you could and you could read all 5 side by side,
Yeah.
and you're like, you know what, I like this one for this particular instance. And they all had, and again, and the thing I appreciated about Jason is that he stuck with it, like the specific, he said, this is what it means. So he gave you the actual text and what it actually said. But then we have all these other translations that we can, you know, see what people have done with them. Like, you know, you could see Stephen Mitchell did a lot of took a lot of liberties. So did Wayne Dwyer, but they were great. I mean, it was great, and it was great to have the original. So it was fun.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right, folks. Thank you very much. Let's see. We got some things coming up this weekend. I think Saturday, we're going to, I think Jason is doing Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 and 4. And then on Sunday at 9 p.m., Christopher Zeloff is going to be here. He's a filmmaker, and he's going to be showing us some Bucky-based footage. And then Monday, of course, is going to be poetry. Tuesday, we are starting Art of War. Okay, don't miss that. You know, again, Jason and Aman, I mean, hats off to them. They're going to be doing the translation of it fresh. So that's going to be amazing. And then on Thursday, we're doing Gospel of John. This time, I talked to Gary, and Gary suggested we do the verses. So we are going to do the verses 14 through 17 of chapter 15. And it's amazing, you know, it's like you can take one of these verses and you can talk about it for 2 hours. And there's still more to say. And then Friday, I don't remember, what is the next one? Is it Divine Feminine, or is it the Design Your Life?
I would like to say
Feminine.
design your life, but Joe won't let me say that. So it's divine feminine.
Divine Feminine. Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. Do you know what you're going to do on Divine Feminine?
Yes, I do. It is going to be focused on the Indian culture, and we're going to study Kali and Shaktism, and oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher the other name, so I'm not going to say it until I know how to. But that's the one that's scary for me, because that's the one I know least about. So
are you going to you should try to reach out to Rupali and see if she wants to participate.
well, she's going to help me with the presentation. So
oh, good.
Yep.
Good. Okay.
I've already reached out, because I don't know what I'm doing.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. See you soon. Bye.
Good night.